This video is brought to you by
CuriosityStream,
the best way to watch thousands of award-winning documentaries and nonfiction movies and TV shows.
The women's movement? Jesus Christ, I haven't even had coffee yet.
What makes a true modern feminist? That's what we're unpacking with our new series, Feminism and Pop Culture, The Future Wave. Each video will be dedicated to one of feminism's many faces, past and present, and how it's represented in pop culture.
Seventh wave feminism is all about owning our sexuality.
In order to understand what the reality of supporting all women and gender equality actually looks like. As our culture collectively revisits the misogynistic treatment of the Britneys, Parises, and Megans of the 2000s, we have to ask, why was this era so deeply toxic for women? A key answer to this question is a thing called postfeminism. This outlook puts forward the idea that we live in a post-feminist society, i.e., one in which misogyny and sexism are over, and therefore feminism is no longer necessary.
You suffered so much growing up in middle-class Paris. I mean, the agony in the trenches of the Sorbonne in the post-feminist era.
Many female-led stories in the early 2000s seemed to celebrate that feminism had delivered women all the freedom and options they could ask for, but also to suggest that all those choices weren't actually making women happier. As post-feminism became more entrenched in the 2000s, high-profile women avoided identifying as feminist.
I'm not a feminist. I hail men. I love men.
While tabloid culture and gossip blogs cultivated an environment of aggressive, accepted misogyny that, in hindsight, is pretty shocking.
Thank you, Britney Spears. Being bad is good for my business.
Yet to this day, many still claim we live in a post-feminist society. The central problem with post-feminism's assertion that sexism has been solved is that it makes it difficult, if not impossible, to call out instances of misogyny and discrimination when they still happen.
Hello, trampy dress, hello!
Here's our take on the myth of post-feminism and why the crucial first step of fighting sexism and misogyny is admitting they're there.
We'll take it out in editing.
If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified about all of our new videos. Rosalind Gill writes that post-feminism originally emerged as a way of making sense of paradoxes and contradictions in the representation of women. But more colloquially, it came to represent the idea that feminism had achieved all that it could, and sometimes even to express that women were losing their essential womanhood in their fight for equality.
These angry feminists, and I say angry feminists like there's some other kind.
In December 1989, the cover of Time magazine read, "Women face the 90s," while the copy asked, "In the 80s, they tried to have it all. Now they've just plain had it. Is there a future for feminism?" From the 60s to the 80s, second-wave feminism made major gains in addressing concrete problems like gender inequality in the workplace and reproductive rights. And post-feminism can be understood on one level as a form of ongoing backlash to what second-wave feminism stood for. Post-feminist storylines in film and TV subtly suggest that women can't be fulfilled through achievement in the workplace, and that true female happiness stems from domestic bliss. 1988's Working Girl seemingly champions the gains of second-wave feminism in a story about a woman rising in her career, but it simultaneously focuses on a character who upholds traditional standards of femininity, is betrayed by a less feminine woman boss, and succeeds with the help of a romantic partner who fulfills her.
Tess is this team's leader. She put this deal together.
Less than a year later, in 1989, Disney's Little Mermaid told a strikingly similar story about a gorgeous young woman with a strong will and desire for self-determination who's betrayed by an overambitious older woman and whose happy ending is winning a man's heart. In the 90s, a long line of spunky female characters were positioned in a positive light due to their independence, only to receive their happily ever afters through traditional heteronormative partnership.
I want the fairy tale.
Then in the early to mid-2000s came what Rosalind Gill describes as the post-feminist canon, including Ally McBeal, Sex and the City, and Bridget Jones's Diary. Amanda D. Lotz writes in Redesigning Women that characters like Ally McBeal and a striking number of female leads that emerged from the late 90s on were empowered and fantastic action heroines, depictions of single career women, flawed yet authentic professionals, who seem to indicate unprecedented possibilities for female characters and audiences. In many ways, the era's plethora of female-led stories appeared to be a great celebration of where feminism had helped us get to.
Ms. Miranda Hobbs Esquire, aka Just Me, bought herself her first apartment and promptly took herself out for a drink.
Strangely, though, the supposed feminist utopia many of these characters were living in was painted as making them kind of unhappy. Ally McBeal had the ostensibly feminist premise of centering a high-powered female protagonist making her way in the traditionally male world of the law. However, much of the show focuses on McBeal's longing for her ex and confronting her biological clock, which is embodied by a small dancing baby. Time magazine, seemingly conversing with its past cover from a decade earlier, pictured McBeal alongside historic feminist thinkers Susan B. Anthony, Gloria Steinem, and Betty Friedan on their June '98 cover under the headline, "Is Feminism Dead?" Sex and the City marked a progression from Ally McBeal by featuring 4 independent, liberated female characters who were content with their strong female friendships and careers. Yet over time, its revolutionary edge gave way to more traditional rom-com storylines, increasingly focused on finding a man and settling down.
Carrie, you're the one.
Bridget Jones has the same goal of wanting to settle down with a little career ambition at first, and unlike these other examples, she's pretty upfront about that.
We'll find nice, sensible boyfriend to go out with.
Angela McRobbie writes that Bridget Jones is the product of modernity, who's directly benefited from feminism. Its progress has allowed her to relocate to the city to earn an independent living without shame or danger. However, this also gives rise to new anxieties.
Unless something changed soon, I was going to live a life where my major relationship was with a bottle of wine.
Part of the humor, or the reason audiences laugh with Bridget, McRobbie argues, is that on some level they're conscious that modern women shouldn't be shamelessly longing for a husband and babies and neglecting their careers as Bridget does, so it is, quote, a relief to escape this censorious politics and freely enjoy that which has been disapproved of. Likewise, H.A. Strickland argues in her essay Women at Work, that post-feminist Hollywood properties have aimed to convince women that they had it better when they had fewer choices. It's important to acknowledge that films and shows of the post-feminist canon provide great comedy and entertainment, and their complex female characters have been empowering to many women. Bridget, Ally, and Carrie spoke to women because they honestly voiced relatable fears and desires.
I am someone who is looking for love.
As well as celebrated the truth that many women still do want to project traditional femininity or have husbands and families, all of which shouldn't be incompatible in any way with feminism. As McRobbie acknowledges, quote, these new young women are confident enough to declare their anxieties about possible failure in regard to finding a husband, they avoid any aggressive or overtly traditional men, and they brazenly enjoy their sexuality.
I'm a trisexual. I'll try anything once.
Yet because these narratives were so set on delivering the satisfaction of a rom-com formula, they could inadvertently reduce their more radical depictions of singledom to just prologue for a traditional happy ever after.
And if you find someone to love the you love, that's just fabulous.
These stories sometimes ended up reinforcing the regressive idea that women were only pretending to be content unless they achieved the one-size-fits-all heteronormative ideal of becoming a wife and mother. These post-feminist stories actually do contain a number of feminist observations too, and end up illustrating a fair amount of sexism that their female characters face.
You want to be known as the miniskirt attorney?
I don't want to be known as the attorney who let the judge tell her how to dress.
But they tend to show these women rising above that sexist environment due to harnessing their strength as individuals. 2000's miscongeniality may underline the unfairness of the boys' club Gracie Hart confronts as an FBI agent, yet the movie's solution to this problem of institutional sexism is her undergoing a makeover so that, as a prettier, more feminine version of herself, she's ready to succeed in both her life and her job.
This experience has been one of the most rewarding and liberating experiences of my life.
Ultimately, what these stories have in common is this emphasis on individualism. So they helped foster the idea that any female advancement was due to her personal choices. And the flip side was the implication that if a woman wasn't advancing, that was on her. Meanwhile, both pop culture and famous celebrities felt compelled to distance themselves from explicit feminism. Female celebrities of that time would frequently declare that they weren't feminists because they were instead humanists, didn't like the label, or loved men too much. In 2001's Legally Blonde, Elle is an intelligent, determined, and capable woman who is proud to be both smart and feminine. And the plot centers on Elle and another woman, Vivian, realizing that it's not worth competing over a man who's not good enough for either of them.
Warner doesn't even do his own laundry.
I know, he has to have it sent out.
I know.
However, the movie makes a joke of the outwardly feminist character, implying that her fixation on women's issues is absurd.
That's why I'm petitioning to have next term be referred to as the winter Ovester.
This type of straw feminist figure who creates issues that don't really exist reinforces the post-feminist idea that feminism no longer has problems of substance to address.
She's part of your mom's feminist group. She hates men too.
So I'm really excited about this series that we're starting with this video. We talk a lot about feminist topics,
Yes.
and we talk about how they are applied in pop culture, or how pop culture expresses a certain view of gender relations. And you know, this is a way for us to really dig in directly to these questions. Speaking about the myth of post-feminism, there are many other things about our world that many of us have probably been completely misunderstanding for years. So if you're like us and you like to clear up those misunderstandings and learn more, you are probably going to enjoy this video's sponsor, CuriosityStream.
CuriosityStream is this awesome service where you can access and watch thousands of the most interesting documentaries and movies about all of the issues that are really important in our world today.
No matter what you're interested in, there are shows and films on everything from heists to emojis. And they also have 35 expert curated collections on there right now.
If you're like me, you're into learning more about feminism. And I bet you'll enjoy the Future's female collection. It's a truly intersectional selection with both historical and contemporary stories about incredible women from across the globe.
We just watched Mama Rwanda, which is about working moms in Rwanda. It's a half-hour documentary, so you can actually get through it if you're a working mom and, you know, really learn something about what somebody else's experience is. And it's set against the backdrop of the country's national reconciliation.
We highly recommend it, and so many of CuriosityStream's other offerings.
So click the link in our description below, curiositystream.com/thetake. Use our promo code, THETAKE, and you'll get a whole year of CuriosityStream for just $14.99.
Check it out.
While pop culture seemed to move beyond explicit feminism, off-screen society was still ruled by socially acceptable misogyny. 1992 was dubbed the Year of the Woman after a record number of women were elected as senators and to Congress. But a 2006 study from Cornell University proved that the narrowing of the wage gap in the 1990s was actually slower than it was in the previous decade. In the 2000s, post-feminism was in the air as famous for being famous culture dawned. And the height of the tabloid's dark power in an internet-focused but pre-social media world made an atmosphere of misogyny more accessible.
I didn't know your ass was that good either. This one? This picture?
What an ass.
Yes, of course, yeah.
They should have called you Ass Spice.
Pop culture routinely punished women for enjoying the freedoms they had supposedly won, as female celebrities were slut-shamed, unapologetically objectified, and routinely pitted against each other. Maybe the most glaring evidence that post-feminism was a myth was the fact that the gains achieved by women only ever seemed to apply to a certain kind of woman, the kind who were thin, cis, white, and heterosexual. In these prominent female-led stories, queerness was either shamed or largely ignored.
I'm not even sure bisexuality exists.
Trans women were othered, depicted as not real women, and turned into punchlines.
There they were, Samantha's friendly neighborhood pre-op transsexual hookers. Half man, half woman, totally annoying.
And while there was little discussion of sexism, there was even less attention paid to the compounded obstacles facing women of color. All this was proof that individualist female role models were not enough to address systemic problems of gender, class, and race. The hashtag #MeToo movement sparked a new era of reflection on the ideologies of post-feminism. Its impact was to cause a mass reevaluation of the culture that allowed powerful men to subjugate women without fear of punishment, and to reject a purely individualistic mindset, drawing attention to how women need progress as a collective. It's also been an opportunity to look back at the kind of rhetoric and mainstream culture attacks that we once collectively deemed acceptable.
Britney Spears is 18. She's like, you know, takes 2 Band-Aids and she's singing there. I don't appreciate that.
I heard when the cops gave Paris the breathalyzer test, they told her to blow and she started sucking.
Monica Lewinsky was attacked with an unrelenting barrage of sexist criticisms and jokes when her relationship with President Clinton first came to light, but has received public support in recent years as we've come to better understand the toxicity of how she was blamed and slut-shamed for being the 22-year-old victim of an abuse of power.
This rush to judgment enabled by technology led to mobs of virtual stone throwers.
And while Lewinsky had no control over this narrative for decades, it feels like a significant milestone that the next series of American Crime Story will focus on the Clinton affair, with Lewinsky working as a producer, thereby helping to tell her own story on a major network. The same reevaluation has been applied to the dismal response to Anita Hill's 1991 accusations of sexual misconduct against Clarence Thomas, and to many starlets of the early 2000s who faced misogynistic degradation for simply existing as women in the public sphere. In framing Britney Spears, we see the ugly role of the tabloid press in damaging Britney's mental health, and how her hyper-sexualized image was used against her.
The way that people treated her, to be very high school about it, was like she was the school slut.
Constance Grady wrote that the leaking of Paris Hilton's sex tape, something which defined the early years of her career, was an act of revenge porn. Megan Fox is receiving retroactive apologies for how her concerns about being objectified as a young teen were routinely ignored.
His solution to that problem was to then have me dancing underneath the waterfall getting soaking wet. So that's sort of a microcosm of how Bay's mind works.
Well, that's really a microcosm of how all our minds work.
Many are also pointing out the unfairness of Janet Jackson's career setbacks after her 2004 Super Bowl halftime wardrobe malfunction, especially since there was no professional harm to Justin Timberlake, the one who actually briefly exposed her chest. And the media's mistreatment of Lindsay Lohan's addiction has come back into the public consciousness.
Who's taking you to rehab? You don't want to talk about that either, right?
Speaking to The Guardian, former gossip columnist Ben Whitcomb said, "I was so seriously worried that either Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, or Britney Spears would die, and the media would pretend to hand-wring in sorrow, but actually their deaths would make a lot of money for them." Our culture's post-feminist outlook was a key weapon wielded against these women, making them feel they couldn't speak out. If misogyny is the water everyone's swimming in, and the party line is that it's been eradicated, how do you even summon the vocabulary or get anyone to listen when you try to voice what's happening to you? Post-Me Too revisionism has revealed that post-feminist culture was wrong for pretending that individual success proved the end of sexism, because the problems of gender inequality are systemic and firmly embedded in everyday life. Tabloids are financially incentivized to provoke women into mental health crises.
That night was not a good night for her, but it was a good night for us because it was a money shot.
Male actors are routinely paid multiples higher than their female co-stars, and interviewers are trained to ask female celebrities totally different questions.
Were you able to wear undergarments?
You're like the fifth person that's asked me
Well, no,
that
because is it inappropriate?
To ask somebody what kind of underpants they wear?
I didn't ask you what kind.
You just asked me if I was wearing any.
Now that #MeToo has brought the abuse of power by many male celebrities and elected officials into the spotlight, it's much harder to deny that sexism, misogyny, transphobia, misogynoir, and other forms of prejudice created by a patriarchal society exist. And it's deeply important to have this foundation of acknowledgement to build on, so we can address these issues. Today, far from the F word being a dirty word, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's adage that we should all be feminists has taken hold.
More of us should reclaim that word. A feminist is a man or a woman who says, yes, there's a problem with gender as it is today, and we must fix it.
And Emma Watson's He for She campaign has sought to involve more men and boys in feminism, recognizing that the negative effects of the patriarchy aren't just felt by women. Sadly, there may always be a need for a women's movement, and one that speaks for all women.
Everyone is loved, everyone deserves justice, and everyone deserves equal protection and prosperity.
Feminism, there's still so much to talk about, and it's so layered. It really is an evolving, ongoing conversation and dialogue.
I think this series is really important to us because we love to talk about these issues, and it's really important for us to talk about them in a real way. What message pop culture is sending. You love a movie, you love a show, and that's great, and we can always enjoy it no matter what, but I think it's also important to bring that consciousness.
The idea is just to stay aware and to be aware and to think more carefully about all of our interactions. And it's what's so cool is the conversation is happening, and the conversation around gender too opens the door to think about it and to think about how we really treat one another and ourselves.